good, then we are gonna just hop onto the lessons. So I think here we left off. We left at area label and area uh, label labeled by attributes. Aria label and aria labeled by attributes. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back here. What are aria roles? So I'm just gonna repeat this one also. So I don't know how it works. I'm just gonna not saying I'm live, but here it's saying I'm live. Okay, so this is something weird. Let's go to X3. I have my YouTube then. How the fuck I'm not live? Should be live here. Yeah, I'm live here. Okay, so I'm live. Yeah, so quality of the audio is really good, so you can just go ahead. Let's start from the aria roles here. So I'm just gonna start it.
What are ARIA roles? ARIA stands for Accessibility Rich Internet Applications. ARIA roles specify the semantic meaning of HTML elements. They're essential for making web content accessible to people who use assistive technologies like screen readers. HTML has semantic and non-semantic elements based on whether they convey meaning about their content. Many semantic HTML elements already have an ARIA role assigned by default. For example, the button element has a default ARIA role of button, but non-semantic elements don't have a role. For example, screen readers will not know how to interpret the purpose of a div if you don't specify its role explicitly.
Okay.
To specify the ARIA role of an element, you just need to add the role attribute, like this, where value is the name of a role in the ARIA specification. It is important to note that specifying a role on an element only does one thing. It informs assistive technologies of the purpose of the element. It does not add any functionality or behavior to the element. If people expect a role to behave a certain way, it is up to you, the developer, to add that expected behavior. For example, adding a role of button to a div does not automatically make it clickable with a mouse or usable with a keyboard. It is the responsibility of the developer to add the expected behavior that allows the div to act like a button. And in most cases, it is just better to use the button element. There are six main categories of ARIA roles: document structure roles, widget roles, landmark roles, live region roles, window roles, and abstract roles. Let's take a look at them in more detail. Document structure roles define the overall structure of the web page. With these roles, assistive technologies can understand the relationships between different sections and help users navigate the content. However, most of the document structure roles are not used in modern web development because browsers already support equivalent semantic HTML elements, which should be prioritized whenever possible. You should specify the roles that don't have an equivalent semantic element. For example, toolbar, tooltip, feed, math, presentation, none, and note. There are other similar roles, but these are the most commonly used ones. This is an example of a div with a math ARIA role. The div contains a mathematical equation.
Mm-hmm.
You'll also notice that the div has an ARIA label attribute. The value of this attribute should be a string that represents the expression. Widget roles Define the purpose and functionality of interactive elements, like scroll bars. Examples of widget roles include scroll bar, search box, separator when focusable, slider, spin button, switch, tab, tab panel, and tree item. Some of these roles have equivalent semantic elements. You should prioritize the semantic element over the role if there is one. For example, you should
Okay.
favor using the HTML button element over adding a role of button to a div. Landmark roles classify and label the primary sections of a web page.
Hmm.
Screen readers use them to provide convenient navigation to important sections of a page. You should use them sparingly to keep the overall layout simple and easy to understand.
Hmm.
Examples of landmark roles are banner, complementary, content info, form, main, navigation, region, and search. Each one of these roles has a corresponding HTML equivalent, such as header, footer, aside, form, main, nav, section, and search. If you use the proper HTML elements to define the sections of your page, then it is not necessary to explicitly add the role attribute to these elements. Live region roles define elements with content that will change dynamically. This way, screen readers and other assistive technologies can announce changes to users with visual disabilities. These roles include alert, log, marquee, status, and timer. Window roles define sub-windows, like pop-up modal dialogues. These roles include alert dialog and dialog. Please note that it is now considered a best practice to use the HTML dialog element and its associated JavaScript methods instead of manually creating a dialog. And
Hmm.
finally, we have abstract roles. These roles help organize the document. They're only meant to be used internally by the browser, not by developers, so you should know that they exist, but you shouldn't use them on your website or web applications. With ARIA roles, you can create accessible and inclusive websites and web applications. They provide semantic information about the purpose and function of HTML elements. Screen readers and other assistive technologies use this information to help users understand the content of your page and set expectations for how to use it, which helps ensure that everyone can have a great user experience.
Okay, let's try it. What is the primary role of ARIA roles? To define the visual appearance of the element, to improve website performance, to provide semantic information about the purpose of the element. Correct answer. Which category of ARIA rules is used to define the purpose and behavior of sub windows like pop-ups, more model dialogues? Hmm. Widget. Which category of ARIA rules is used to indicate dynamic content must be announced to users? Landmark? No. Live region? Correct. Uh, Sub windows. I think that's landmark. No. Document? No. Window. Oh, so okay. I should have rewatched it, but no problem. I don't think these are that important. I'm just gonna skip
What
through
are
them.
the roles of the ARIA label and ARIA labeled by attributes? It is important to make sure that all users, including those living with disabilities, can access websites without issues. For people using screen readers, the ARIA label and ARIA labeled by attributes provide crucial information about page elements that might be unclear or invisible. Let's look at what the ARIA label and ARIA labeled by attributes are and the roles they play in making the web accessible to people with visual impairments and related disabilities. You'll notice both ARIA label and ARIA labeled by are prefixed with ARIA. So what does that mean? ARIA stands for Accessible Reach Internet Applications. It's a set of attributes prefixed with ARIA, which lets developers communicate the purpose of elements to assistive technologies. The ARIA label attribute is an invisible label for interactive elements. It adds a text label to an element that screen readers can read. ARIA label is especially useful for elements that do not have visible text but still need to be described by screen readers. For example, buttons with only icons often need ARIA label to convey their purpose. Here is an example. In this case, a screen reader may announce this button as search button, even though the button only contains an icon. The ARIA label attribute tells screen readers what text to use in place of the icon. If the button contained the text search instead of an icon, then there would be no need for the ARIA label attribute, as the text would provide the label for the button. For input elements, the ARIA label attribute provides a label directly if there isn't a visible label associated with the input. The ARIA labeled by attribute does the exact same thing as the ARIA label attribute, but instead of defining the text directly in the attribute, you use a reference to text that already exists on the page. The existing text must have an ID attribute, which will be used for the reference value in the ARIA labeled by attribute. Here is an example. In this case, the text for the button is being used as the label for the search input. Screen readers will announce the input as something like search edit. If you later decide you want to change the button text to find, the label for the input will automatically be updated for the new text, since it is referencing the button text. Combining multiple ID values into a single ARIA labeled by attribute value is also possible. Here is how that works. For the slider, the screen reader will look out for the content of the volume label and volume details elements and announce volume adjust the volume level. You've seen that both ARIA label and ARIA labeled by attributes help screen readers understand what elements do. So which one should you use? Since they both provide the same functionality, either can be used, but there may be a few advantages to using ARIA labeled by over ARIA label. If someone is using a translation service to translate the content on your page, the text in an ARIA label attribute may not always be translated. Using ARIA labeled by can also help prevent a mismatch between the visible label text and the invisible label for screen reader users, since updating the visible text will automatically update the invisible label. And ARIA labeled by can make it much easier to programmatically create complex invisible labels consisting of multiple sources of text. One last note, do not use ARIA label and ARIA labeled by on an element at the same time. In this case, the invisible label for screen readers will always be determined by ARIA labeled by, and ARIA label will be completely ignored.
Okay, I don't understand what.
And ARIA labeled by cannot volume adjust the volume level.
So as we can see, this div has a span here, which has an ID of volume label, okay, and volume details, okay, type ARIA labeled by. Okay, let me just go here. Input field has ARIA labeled by search button. Okay, so this is a search button, and this is a button, search button.
Being used as the label for the search input. Screen readers will announce impairments and related disabilities. You'll notice both ARIA label and ARIA labeled by are prefixed with ARIA. So what does that mean? ARIA stands for Accessible Reach Internet Applications. It's a set of attributes prefixed with ARIA, which lets developers communicate the purpose of elements to assistive technologies. The ARIA label attribute is an invisible label for interactive elements. It adds a text label to an element that screen readers can read. ARIA label is especially useful for elements that do not have visible text but still need to be described by screen readers. For example, buttons with only icons often need ARIA label to convey their purpose. Here is an example. In this case, a screen reader may announce this button as search button, even though the button only contains an icon. The ARIA label attribute tells screen readers what text to use in place of the icon. If the button contained the text search instead of an icon, then there would be no need for the ARIA label attribute, as the text would provide the label for the button. For input elements, the ARIA label attribute provides a label directly if there isn't a visible label associated with the input. The ARIA labeled by attribute does the exact same thing as the ARIA label attribute, but instead of defining the text directly in the attribute, you use a reference to text that already exists on the page. The existing text must have an ID attribute, which will be used for the reference value in the ARIA labeled by attribute. Here is an example. In this case, the text for the button is being used as the label for the search input. Screen readers will announce the input as something like search edit. If you later decide you want to change the button text to find, the label for the input will automatically be updated for the new text since it is referencing the button text. Combining multiple ID values into a single ARIA labeled by attribute value is also possible. Here is how that works. For the slider, the screen reader will look out for the content of the volume label and volume details elements and announce volume adjust the volume level. You've seen that both ARIA label and ARIA labeled by attributes help screen readers understand what elements do. So which one should you use? Since they both provide the same functionality, either can be used, but there may be a few advantages to using ARIA labeled by over ARIA label. If someone is using a translation service to translate the content on your page, the text in an ARIA label attribute may not always be translated. Using ARIA labeled by can also help prevent a mismatch between the visible label text and the invisible label for screen reader users, since updating the visible text will automatically update the invisible label. And ARIA labeled by can make it much easier to programmatically create complex invisible labels consisting of multiple sources of text. One last note, do not use ARIA label and ARIA labeled by on an element at the same time. In this case, the invisible label for screen readers will always be determined by ARIA labeled by, and ARIA label will be completely ignored.
Okay. Uh, accessible rich internet applications. What do both and do? They modify the visual appearance of the element to provide labels for the element to enhance the accessibility of the user screen readers. Yes. When should you use ARIA labeled by over ARIA label? When you need to provide tooltip, when you want to change the color of the element, when you need to hide an element from screen readers. Yeah, I guess this is the correct answer. No, when there is an existing visible text on the page and can be, no, wait a minute. When should you use आर्या labeled by over आर्या label? आर्या labeled by का यूज कब करना चाहिए आर्या लेबल के ऊपर? आर्या लेबल को हम इग्नोर कर रहे हैं when you need to provide tooltip for an element, when you want to change the color of where there is existing visible text on the page that can be used as a label. This is the correct answer. एग्जिस्टिंग विजिबल टेक्स्ट है जिसको हम लेवल की तरह यूज़ किया जा सकता है, तो हम आर्या लेवल बाई का यूज़ करेंगे. What is the ARIA hidden attribute and how does it work?
What is the ARIA hidden attribute and how does it work? If you ever need to display content while at the same time hiding it from people who use assistive technology like screen readers, you can use the ARIA hidden attribute. You just need to add it to the HTML element that you want to hide and set its value to true, like you can see over here.
Okay.
This attribute hides the element and all of its children from the accessibility tree while keeping them visible on the page. Common use cases include icons and images that only have a decorative purpose and duplicated content. It is important to remember that ARIA Hidden only hides content from assistive technology like screen readers. If the content should be hidden from everyone, then you should not use ARIA Hidden to hide it. For example, a hamburger menu that is currently collapsed must be hidden from all keyboard users, not just screen reader users. In this case, you could set the CSS display property to none on the menu to remove it from the DOM when it is collapsed. You should never use ARIA hidden to hide an element that is focusable with the keyboard. The ARIA hidden attribute only removes the element from the accessibility tree. It does not remove it from the DOM. Thus, it will still be possible for screen reader users to tab into the element, but their screen reader will not announce the element, effectively causing them to focus on nothing. Here is an example where we hide an icon from the accessibility tree by adding the ARIA hidden attribute with a value of true. We only keep the text exposed to assistive technologies to avoid any confusions that may arise from the redundancy of having both an icon and text for the same purpose. You do not need to use ARIA hidden when the HTML element already has a hidden attribute, when the element or the element's ancestor is already hidden with display none, and when the element or the element's ancestor is already hidden with visibility hidden. In these three cases, the element is already removed from the DOM and thus hidden from the accessibility tree, so the ARIA hidden attribute is not necessary. As with using any ARIA attributes, you should always test with assistive technologies, and preferably having people with disabilities test your work to make sure that it's easy to understand even with these hidden elements. You should also know that setting ARIA hidden to false will not expose the element to assistive technologies if any of its parents has this attribute set to true. The ARIA hidden attribute is used to hide elements from people who use assistive technology, such as screen reader users. While it can be helpful for hiding purely decorative elements and duplicated content, it should be used sparingly to avoid hindering accessibility. In general, all content and functionality available on the page should also be available to people using assistive technology. The use case for ARIA hidden is very narrow and should be limited primarily to making the experience cleaner for screen reader users by removing purely decorative or duplicate information. Do not use ARIA hidden to hide content that you don't think screen reader users would be interested in. Screen reader users deserve to have access to all the information on the page. By following these best practices and testing the user experience, you can create inclusive online experiences for everyone.
What is the primary purpose of ARIA hidden attribute? To hide elements from excessive assertive technologies. When should the ARIA hidden attribute be used? For elements that are visually hidden but still important for users to experience. Correct answer is this. What is the potential risk of overusing the ARIA hidden attribute? Reduce the website performance completely older, hinder accessibility with users with disabilities. No, this is correct. This is correct. When should be ARIA hidden? No, this is not. For decorative yeah, this is the correct answer. For decorative elements that do not contribute to the main content, we should use ARIA hidden. Okay. What is ARIA expanded attribute and how does it work?
What is the ARIA expanded attribute and how does it work? The ARIA expanded attribute is used for accessibility purposes to indicate if a control is expanded or collapsed. It's used in conjunction with collapsible widgets like menus, accordions, and other disclosure widgets that control the visibility of the content. The ARIA expanded attribute is set to true if the control is expanded, or false if it is collapsed. The information provided by ARIA Expanded allows people using screen readers to understand the current state of the control, whether it's expanded or collapsed. The ARIA Expanded attribute is applied to the interactive element that toggles the visibility of the collapsible widget. For example, if a button toggles an
To
expandable
not
menu,
show that.
the ARIA Expanded attribute is
Okay.
placed on the button. When the menu is expanded,
When the
the
primary
ARIA
purpose of ARIA
expanded
expanded
attribute
attribute
should be set to
to
true,
define
like in
visual
this
appearance of
example.
element to
When
improve
the
website
menu is
performance indicate
collapsed,
whether
it
the
should be set
etc.
to false instead.
Button ARIA expanded false menu button to enhance browser compatibility. Okay. I
And
do
how
not
does it
understand.
work? The ARIA expanded attribute is used for accessibility purposes to indicate if a control is expanded or collapsed. It's used in conjunction with collapsible widgets like menus, accordions, and other disclosure widgets that control the visibility of the content. The ARIA expanded attribute is set to true if the control is expanded, or false if it is collapsed. The information provided by ARIA Expanded allows people using screen readers to understand the current state of the control, whether it's expanded or collapsed. The ARIA Expanded attribute is applied to the interactive element that toggles the visibility of the collapsible widget. For example, if a button toggles an expandable menu, the ARIA Expanded attribute is placed on the button. When the menu is expanded, the ARIA expanded attribute should be set to true, like in this example. When the menu is collapsed, it should be set to false instead. You must always have the ARIA expanded attribute set to either true or false on the controlling element. For example, if a button toggles the visibility of a menu, the default value for ARIA expanded should be based on the default visibility of the menu. If the menu is expanded by default, ARIA expanded should initially be set to true. If the menu is collapsed by default, ARIA expanded should initially be set to false. The value of ARIA expanded should be updated dynamically using JavaScript as the user interacts with the element. Additionally, the properties ARIA controls and ARIA owns can be used in combination with ARIA expanded to establish a programmatic connection between the controlling element and the element it controls. Let's start with ARIA controls. When used with ARIA expanded, the ARIA controls attribute is used to specify the element being controlled. For example, a button might expand or collapse a list acting as a menu. The value of ARIA controls will be the ID of the controlled element, the menu list in this example. Notice that the list immediately follows the controlling button. For expandable buttons like this, it is best to have the expanded content immediately follow the element that it controls in the DOM. This prevents screen readers users from having to search for the expanded content and makes it easier for keyboard users to navigate through any interactive controls in the expanded content. It is not possible to place the expanded content immediately after the controlling element. The ARIA owns attribute allows you to virtually move it after the control in the accessibility tree. This allows assistive technology like screen readers to pretend the expanded content is placed directly after the control in the DOM. There are drawbacks to using the ARIA owns attribute. It creates unnecessary verbosity for screen reader users, since most screen readers will automatically read out the entire contents of the expanded element when first expanded. It also does not change the tab order, potentially forcing keyboard users to tab through all of the other interactive controls on the page before reaching the expanded content, unless you manage the tabbing order with JavaScript. Ideally, the expandable content should be placed after the control element, and the ARIA-owns attribute should only be used in a worst-case scenario when that is not possible. If it must be used, you will need to thoroughly test with a wide range of screen readers and browsers to ensure that your implementation is accessible for everyone. And just a reminder, when you use either ARIA controls or ARIA owns, the value of ARIA expanded must continue to be updated as the control is expanded and collapsed. The ARIA expanded attribute indicates whether a control is expanded or collapsed. This information is essential for screen reader users, helping them understand the current state of collapsible elements, like menus, accordions, and other similar disclosure widgets. By using ARIA expanded correctly, you can create an intuitive user experience for everyone.
Primary purpose of ARIA expanded attribute to define the when should ARIA expanded attribute be used? For all elements or uh, for collapsible elements like menus and accordions. What is the possible value for ARIA expanded attribute? Okay, possible attribute.
If it must be used in the accessibility tree.
True. So let's go here, I guess. False. False or true, I guess. So false or true is the correct answer. ARIA life attribute and how does it work?
What is the ARIA Live attribute and how does it work? The ARIA Live attribute creates a live region on your page, which can be used to notify screen reader users of dynamic content changes in the live region as they occur. Common uses of live region include messages that are displayed after an action has been taken, such as an error message or confirmation, content that updates periodically, such as a ticker, marquee, or countdown timer, or general status messages. Because the reading focus for screen readers can only be at one place at a time, screen reader users will not notice a content change if their focus is on another part of the page. Live regions allow screen reader users to be automatically notified of changes that happen on the page in real time. Without a live region, screen reader users might miss important content updates available to sighted users, since a sighted user has the ability to scan the entire page. There are three possible values for this attribute, based on the priority of the information. If you set ARIA Live to the value assertive, that means that the update is very important. It has the highest priority, so the user should be notified immediately. This means that the screen reader will interrupt any announcement it is currently making to announce the content change in the live region. Such interruptions can be extremely disruptive, so the assertive value should only be used for time-sensitive or critical notifications. The next value in order of priority is polite. This value means that the update is not urgent, so the screen reader can wait until the current announcement is finished or until the user stops typing before announcing the update. Most live regions will use the polite value. The lowest priority value for ARIA Live is off, which means that the update will not be announced unless the content is in an element that currently has keyword focus. Realistically, this value is almost never used as the use case is very narrow and it is not implemented consistently, if at all, across screen readers. If you need live regions, plan on using polite for everything, except critical messages that need assertive. It's also important to note that the ARIA Live attribute is not required if the updated information is contained in an element with an ARIA role of alert, log, marquee, status, or timer, as these roles already have a default ARIA Live value. But the default value can be changed by explicitly setting ARIA Live on the element. Choosing the right ARIA Live value depends on the priority of the updated information. If the updates are urgent, you should notify the user immediately with assertive. But you should use this only if the updates are really urgent, because sudden interruptions can potentially disorient users and affect the user experience. If the update can wait until the next task is finished, you should use polite instead. The ARIA Live attribute lets assistive technologies know when the content is changing dynamically on a web page. This helps users with disabilities stay updated on important announcements and updates. By using ARIA Live appropriately, you can ensure that users are aware of these updates based on their priority.
Polite announces updates immediately. Assertive announces updates when the focus is on other element. I don't know this one, so I'm gonna just go for this. Some common ARIA states using custom control element. हाँ.
What are some common
No.
ARIA states used on custom control elements? Semantic form control elements like input, select, text area, button, and field set have built-in states that are conveyed to assistive technologies. For example, you could use the disabled attribute to disable a button, or the checked attribute to indicate that a checkbox is checked. But if you are creating a custom control element, you need to use ARIA attributes to convey the state of the control to assistive technologies. In this lecture video, we will use a few common ARIA states that you can use on custom control elements. The first ARIA state that we will discuss is ARIA selected. This state is used to indicate that an element is selected. You can use this state on custom controls like a tabbed interface, a list box, or a grid. Here is an example of how you can use ARIA selected on a custom tab control. Tabs are used to display multiple panels of content in a limited space. The ARIA selected state is used to indicate which tab is currently selected. When the user selects a tab, the ARIA selected state of the selected tab is set to true, and the ARIA selected state of the other tabs is set to false. Another common ARIA state is ARIA disabled. This state is used to indicate that an element is disabled, only to people with assistive technologies, such as screen readers. It is important to note that ARIA disabled does not actually disable the element. It is up to you, the developer, to make it look and act like a disabled element. This attribute is also commonly used on native HTML elements in place of the disabled attribute. Which one you choose will depend on the context where the button is being used. Here is an example of how you can use ARIA disabled on a custom edit button. The ARIA disabled attribute is used to tell screen reader users that the edit button is disabled and cannot be interacted with. Again, it does not actually disable the button. When using ARIA disabled, you will need to apply styling and JavaScript to make the control look and behave like a disabled button. In most cases, you will probably use the native button element, but there are cases where you might need to use a custom control. So it is essential to know how to convey the state of the control to assistive technologies. The next ARIA state that we will discuss is ARIA has pop-up. This state is used to indicate that an interactive element will trigger a pop-up element when activated. You can only use the ARIA pop-up attribute when the pop-up has one of the following roles: menu, list box, tree, grid, or dialog. The value of ARIA pop-up must be either one of these roles, or true, which defaults to the menu role. Here is an example of a file editor menu that uses ARIA has pop-up. The ARIA has pop-up state is used to indicate that the file menu button will open a pop-up menu when activated. Screen reader users may hear this additional information when they navigate to the button. You will need to use JavaScript to show and hide the pop-up menu, and to implement proper keyboard support for interacting with the menu. Also, please note that the ARIA menu role refers to a very specific type of menu. It generally refers to a list of actions that the user can invoke, similar to a menu on a desktop application. It does not include more common uses of what we typically refer to as menus, such as navigation menus. Realistically, most menus you create on the web will not be ARIA menus, and you will not use ARIA has pop-up with them. The next ARIA state that we will discuss is ARIA required. The ARIA required attribute is used to indicate that a field needs to be filled out before a form is submitted. Here is an example of working with the ARIA required attribute for a custom form control. We need to use the content editable attribute so users can type in their input. We are also using the ARIA required attribute set to true to indicate that this custom form control is required. To make the form look like a natural form control, you would need to add CSS. You would also need to add JavaScript to prevent the form from being submitted without content. If the label already has the word required, then you should omit the ARIA required attribute. This ensures that screen readers only announce the word required once. In most cases, you will probably use the native label and form elements with the required attribute. But if you need to create a custom form control, then it is important to add the ARIA required attribute when necessary. Additionally, the ARIA required attribute can also be used on native form inputs, such as the input, text area, and select elements. This is often preferred to the native required attribute, since the required attribute may have potential usability and accessibility concerns, particularly with the default error handling provided by the browser. Ultimately, you will need to test in order to determine which attribute is best for your situation. The last ARIA state that we will discuss is ARIA checked. This attribute is used to indicate whether an element is in the checked state. It is most commonly used when creating custom checkboxes, radio buttons, switches, and list boxes. Here is an example of how you can use ARIA checked on a custom checkbox control. Native checkbox elements have a built-in check state that is conveyed to assistive technologies. But if you are creating a custom checkbox control, you will need to use the ARIA checked attribute to indicate its state. When the user interacts with the custom checkbox control, you will need to update the ARIA checked state to reflect the new state of the checkbox. When the checkbox is selected, the ARIA checked attribute is set to true. When it is unchecked, it is set to false. Native elements typically have better support and built-in accessibility features. However, if you must create your own custom controls, Using ARIA attributes is essential to convey the state of these controls to assistive technologies effectively. As always, test your work to ensure that ARIA attributes are applied correctly and that the custom control functions in a way that is both accessible and user-friendly.
Okay, what ARIA states would use to indicate the tab are currently selected? Selected? Uh, in the context of custom controls, which ARIA state would be indicate the disabled? When you want to indicate that the menu item has submenu, which ARIA state hash pop up? Correct. Okay, become a fucking supporter. How to become a supporter? I don't have money. I am broke. No problem. You just have to fly in space to get money. Ask me later. What is the ARIA controls attribute and how does it work?
What is the ARIA controls attribute and how does it work? The ARIA controls attribute is used to create a programmatic relationship between an element that controls the presence of another element on a page and the element it controls. This relationship can help screen reader users better understand how the control works. Common uses include a set of tabs that control the visibility of different sections of content, or a button that toggles the visibility of a menu. Let's take a look at an example to see how this works. In this example of a tabbed interface, we have a div element with a set of 3 buttons. Each button represents a tab and has the role attribute set to tab. In most tabbed interfaces, the first tab panel is visible by default, so the first tab button has an ARIA selected attribute set to true to indicate that its associated section of content is currently visible. The ARIA controls attribute is used to associate each button with the section of content that it controls. Here are the 3 sections of content that correspond to the tabs. Each section of content has a role attribute set to tab panel and an ARIA labeled by attribute that points to the corresponding tab to give the panel an accessible name. The hidden attribute is used to hide the sections of content that are not currently selected. Each section ID matches the value of the ARIA controls attribute on the corresponding button. The section 1 ID matches the ARIA controls attribute on the first button. Section 2 matches the ARIA controls attribute on the second button. And section 3 matches the ARIA controls attribute on the third button. This is how the association between the tabs and their sections of content is established. To switch between different sections, you will need to use JavaScript to update the hidden attribute on the section and the ARIA selected attribute on the button based on which section is currently visible. Only one section can be visible at a time, and it should not have the hidden attribute. And ARIA selected should be set to true on this button. The remaining hidden sections should all have the hidden attribute, and ARIA selected should be set to false on their buttons. Tabs are a common use case for the ARIA controls attribute, but it can be used in other scenarios where one element controls the visibility or behavior of another element. Other examples include accordions, drop-down menus, and modals. The next time you design a user interface that involves controlling the visibility of elements, consider using the ARIA controls attribute to establish the relationship between the controlling element and the controlled element.
Okay, I guess. What is the ARIA control attribute and how does it work? What is the purpose of ARIA control attribute in the context of tabs. To specify which tab is currently active, to associate the tab with the section control. How does the controls attribute affect the content section of, for example, it automatically updates the content based on the user input. It hides or shows the section based on which tab is selected. It changes the tab style to indicate it's selected. Okay, it defines the visual. No, it provides in the provided example how is arias labeled by attribute used to specify which tab control which content section to identify the content section that a tab controls to define the role of the tab and content section to automatically switch between the content. I don't know, bro. This is actually correct to identify the content section that tab controls. Okay. It changes the tab style to indicate selected. It changes the tab style to indicate it is selected. No. Okay, let's hop on to another one. What is the area described by and how does it work?
What is the area described by attribute and how does it work? The area described by attribute is used to provide additional information about an element to screen reader users by referencing existing content on the page. It creates a programmatic association between the element and the content, technically referred to as an accessible description, which screen readers can use to inform users of the additional information when they interact with the element. The most common use for ARIA described by is to associate instructions and error messages with form inputs. Due to the various methods that screen reader users have for navigating a page, they may miss these messages when navigating between inputs. Using ARIA described by helps ensure that they will hear them. Let's take a look at a few examples to understand how it works. In this first example, we have a form element that accepts a password. We're using a label element for the password text and associating that with the password input field. We also have a paragraph element that describes the password requirements. We are using the ARIA described by attribute to associate the password input field with the password requirements in the paragraph element. When a screen reader user interacts with this input, their screen reader will announce the name of the input, password, and may then also announce the password requirements. This is not an absolute guarantee, however, as some screen readers may not automatically announce the additional content, or may only announce it in specific circumstances. This is not uncommon. Each screen reader is different and handles ARIA attributes in their own way. This does not negate the use of ARIA described by, as it will benefit screen reader users in general. Another good use case is when you have a delete button. Here is an example of a delete button followed by a message describing what will happen when the button is clicked. Just like in the earlier example, we associate the delete button with the message using the ARIA described by attribute. The ID value and the value of the ARIA described by attribute must match. The ARIA described by attribute is a powerful attribute that can be used to help ensure that additional information about an element is provided to screen reader users when they interact with the element. It is most commonly used to associate instructions and error messages with form inputs in order to reduce the chance that screen reader users will miss these messages as they navigate the form.
Okay. What is the purpose of ARIA described by attribute HTML? To specify the unique identifier of an element, to prove additional information about the element actor, to define the language HTML, to control visibility. In the example provided, how does ARIA described by attribute enhance the user experience? Form field changes the visual appear. No, it associates additional descriptive text. Yes. How does ARIA described by attribute used in the example with the close button and modal dialog? It is used to define side. No. Um, okay. What does ARIA describe by HTML? It provides the additional information about the element. I think it defines the language here. No, then it should be correct. It provides the additional information about the element. Okay, 3. When is the alt attribute needed, and what are some examples of good alt text? What is the purpose of alt in the image? Let's learn.
When is the alt attribute needed, and what are some examples of good alt text? Alternative text, often abbreviated as alt text, is a brief text description of an image. It provides essential information about the image for users who cannot see it, such as people who use screen readers and other assistive technologies. It's essential for making websites accessible to people with visual disabilities. Alternative text is also used by search engines to understand images. Some browsers may also display it when an image is not loaded properly. This can happen when the image file is missing or when the user has connectivity issues, so it's helpful for many different purposes. Here we have a picture of a puppy. A person with a visual disability will not be able to know what's in the image unless it's described in the alt text. An example of bad alt text for this image would be a cute puppy. This text is not specific enough to convey the important details of the image, like what does the puppy look like? Where is the puppy? Are there any important objects around the puppy? Let's improve this. An example of good alternative text would be a black and white puppy with an orange color lies on its belly in the sand, looking off to the side. A bright orange ball rests near its front paws. Here you can see this in HTML with an image element, the alt attribute, and a more detailed description. It is important to note that there is no one correct way to write alt text for an image. What you include in your description will depend on the context the picture is used in. For example, if the puppy picture was on a website about dog breeds, you might want to include more specifics about the physical description of the puppy, and possibly ignore the fact that the puppy is at the beach playing with an orange ball. Ultimately, the alt text you use for an image should reflect the primary purpose for including the image on the page, and the information you provide should give people who can't see the image the necessary details to understand that purpose. Here we have another example. This time you can see a beautiful tropical resort. Let's describe it. An example of bad alt text for this image would be resort. This is too short and it doesn't provide enough information about the image. To improve this description, you could expand it to include the most important elements of the image. Tropical resort featuring a swimming pool surrounded by palm trees and bungalows. This is much better. You can use the alt attribute in HTML like this. Great! Now that you know what makes good and bad alt text, let's see some of the best practices. You should try to keep the alt text short. It should be detailed enough to understand the image, but not so long that it becomes confusing. You should not try to describe every little detail. Focus on the most important aspects of the image. Generally, you don't need to start with image of or picture of. You can just start the description directly. If there's similar text around the image, you don't need to write it again. It's usually recommended to end the alt text with a period for consistency. If the image is a link, instead of describing the image itself, the alt text should describe what will happen if users click on it. For example, if your website has a right arrow icon that takes the user to the next page, instead of writing an alt text that only says right arrow, like in this example where you can see the alt attribute with this description, you should write something like this instead, where the alt text describes what will happen if users click on the image. They will go to the next page. Only images that convey important information should have alt text. If an image is only used for decorative purposes, it should have null or empty alt text, so it can be ignored by screen readers and other assistive technologies. For example, here we have an abstract image. If this is only used for decorative purposes and doesn't convey anything that might be important for the user, you can assign a null alt text. This is what you would write in HTML, an image element with an alt attribute. The value of this attribute is empty, so screen readers will just ignore it. Every image on your website should have an alt attribute, even if it's empty. If you omit the alt attribute completely, some screen readers will read the file name instead, which can be distracting for people who use assistive technologies, so this is not recommended. Finally, before your website is live, you should carefully test if screen readers can read the alt text correctly. Writing effective alt text is essential for creating accessible web content. As a web developer, by providing clear descriptions of your images, you can make sure that everyone can engage with your website in an inclusive online experience.
I need to control myself. What is the purpose of alt text in the image? It improves the appearance, it provides a decorative element. This is the correct answer. When it is appropriate to leave the alt text empty for an image. When the image is important to understand the content. When the image is purely decorative, I guess. What should be the primary focus of alt text and image that acts as a link? Describe the image visually, indicate the link's destination, combining both image maybe this. Incorrect. Maybe this. No. Okay. 87% complete.
What are the accessibility benefits for good link text, and what are examples of good link text? Let's take a look at the benefits of writing good link text in the context of accessibility and some examples of good link text. The first visible benefit of good link text is that it makes it easier for everyone to find information quickly. Descriptive links help users know where they are headed and what they'll access. This ensures the user doesn't feel lost and improves the overall user experience. For those using screen readers, a clear and descriptive link text is a must. Screen readers read the link text aloud, so a text like "Read our accessibility guide" is a way better than "Click here." Making link text clear and descriptive isn't just beneficial for those living with visual impairments. Descriptive links also help people with cognitive disabilities by providing clear context. Here are some best practices to keep in mind while writing link texts. Make sure links are visually distinct by using underlining and other visual cues so users can easily identify and navigate them. Avoid generic link text like "here," "click here," and "more info," as they don't provide any useful information. Aim for concise and descriptive link text, ideally between 2 and 5 words, that convey the link's purpose. Avoid jargon and abbreviations that users may not understand. Focus on the destination, not the action. For example, user behavior results, instead of "click here to read more." Don't repeat the same link text for different destinations. Place links in a way that they make sense with the surrounding text. For example, for more details, visit events page, instead of "click here for more." Here are some examples of good link text for specific use cases, compared to less helpful ones. Let's say you want to link to a page providing details about an element, like this. Details is vague and doesn't provide specific information about what the user will find if they click the link. Without additional context, users might not know if the link leads to details about a webinar, a product, a policy, or something else. Now, here is an example of good link text. This link gives users context about the content they will find, making it easier to decide whether they want to click on it. It reduces ambiguity by specifying that the link is related to a webinar. Here is another example linking to a post in a blog. The link text "read more" is not ideal in terms of accessibility because it lacks content. Here is a better link text example. This updated link text provides users with a clearer idea of what to expect and why they might want to click the link, which is particularly important for those using screen readers. Let's take a look at one more example. Let's say you want to provide more information about a certain topic. "More info" is also vague and can be problematic for accessibility. It doesn't provide specific details about the link's destination, which can be confusing for users relying on screen readers or those who might be navigating the site in a non-linear way. Here is a better example for link text. This updated link text is better because it clearly describes what the user will find if they click on the link. Users can immediately understand that the link leads to information about your accessibility efforts.
What is the first visible benefit of good link text? It helps the user know where they are headed and what they access. It helps users know where they are headed and what they yeah. Which of the following is the best practice for writing the link texts? Use generic text. No. Make links visually distinct. Focus on the action rather than the destination. Click. Repeat the same link. Make links visually distinct and understanding. 91% complete. What are good ways to make audio and video content accessible?
are good ways to make audio and video content accessible. Multimedia, especially video, has become the go-to format for sharing information online. With this surge in content, there is a growing need to ensure everyone can access and enjoy video and audio content online, irrespective of their abilities or environment. Making your audio and video accessible isn't just a nice to have, it's essential for reaching a wider audience. Let's look at some inexpensive ways to make your video and audio content more accessible. A video is not just about visuals, but also audio. So the first thing you should consider doing is adding captions or subtitles to your video content. Captions provide the text version of spoken words and important nonverbal sounds like music or laughter, synchronized with the video. Subtitles, on the other hand, are essential for people who don't understand the language you're speaking. This helps not only people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but also those watching videos in noisy or quiet environments. To add captions or subtitles to your video or audio content, you can use the track element inside your video or audio element. The kind attribute is used to tell the track element how it should be used. The src lang attribute, source lang attribute, represents the language for the track content. The label attribute is a descriptive title for the text track that browsers use to identify and display it in the list of available tracks. Another important thing to consider is providing a transcript for your audio and video content. A transcript is a text version of all the spoken words in your audio or video. Unlike captions, transcripts don't need to be synchronized with the media. Transcripts are useful for deaf people and those hard of hearing. They're also beneficial for people who prefer reading instead of watching or listening. Transcripts also make your content searchable, allowing users to quickly find specific parts of your audio or video. If you have a video or audio on a website, you can simply add the captions below the audio or video. If you're publishing videos on a video sharing platform like YouTube or Vimeo, they have automatic captions and transcripts for videos. But if you're not satisfied, you can use services like Vid.io, Ref, Amara, and Descript. Other ways to make your video and audio content accessible include adding a sign language overlay for videos for deaf people and those hard of hearing, providing volume and speed controls, ensuring good contrast for on-screen text, and offering multiple formats.
How are captions different from subtitles? Captions include spoken words, nonverbal sounds. How can you add captions or subtitles directly to your video audio? By using caption tag. What are the transcripts? Why are transcripts important for video and audio content? Uh, the transcript important for the audio content. Transcripts are only useful for people. Uh, yeah, this is the correct answer. Maybe correct. Six. What are some ways to make web application keyboard accessible?
What are some ways to make web applications keyboard accessible? Many users rely on keyboards instead of mice due to physical disabilities, repetitive strain injuries, or personal preference. This includes users of screen readers and those who may not have a working mouse. Keyboard accessibility ensures these users can navigate web applications effectively without barriers. Let's look at some practical techniques you can employ to make web applications keyboard accessible. Many users use the Tab key to navigate through interactive elements on a web page. The Tab index attribute is used to make elements focusable and define the relative order in which they should be navigated using the keyboard. It takes a numerical value, which can be positive, negative, or zero. Here is the basic syntax. It is important to never use the tab index attribute with a value greater than 0. Instead, you should use a value of 0 or -1. You can set the tab index to -1 to allow it to receive programmatic focus. This is used in a variety of situations for focus management, such as when you need to set the focus on a heading, error message, or dialog, or you're building custom components such as tabbing interfaces or tree components. Setting tab index to 0 allows you to add an element that does not receive keyboard focus by default into the page's natural tab order. This allows keyboard users to tab to the element. This is primarily used when building custom elements that need keyboard functionality. Access key is another attribute you can use to make your web project keyboard accessible. It allows you to define a key that focuses on or activates a particular element. In this code, access key S assigns the key S to the Save button. On most browsers, pressing Alt S on Windows and Control Option S on Mac will activate this button. Access key C sets the key C to the Cancel button, allowing users to activate it using Alt C on Windows or Control Option C on Mac. Access key H assigns the key H to the home link, allowing users to navigate to the home page using Alt H on Windows and Control Option H on Mac. Please note that the exact key combination to activate the access key might vary depending on the browser and operating system. It's typically Alt and the specified key on Windows and Control Option specified key on Mac. Another way to make the keyboard accessible in your apps is to make sure you provide clear focus indicators. If you feel the default browser focus indicator is not enough, you can override it by targeting the focus state of the element. Here is an example of styling the focus state for an HTML element. The outline property is used to define the outline around the element. This example sets the outline to a solid blue line with 2 pixels set for the thickness. The focus indicator should be styled in a way that makes it obvious which element currently has focus. In order to be accessible, the indicator must have a minimum color contrast of at least 3:1 with the background color it covers. You should also avoid keyboard traps, which occur when a user cannot move focus away from a certain element in components like modals and pop-ups.
Why is the tab index property important when managing keyboard? It allows you to control the order. It adds animation. It hides non-essential. No. It allows you to control the order. How does access key attribute contribute to keyboard accessibility on a web page? It allows you to define specific keys that focus on or activates a particular element. Why exactly it is important to avoid keyboard traps in web application? And that is 100% completed. Now we have completed the accessibility part, importance of accessibility and good HTML structure. We have learned so much. Now we have to build a checkout page here. This is a lab section now, and we are gonna use here. So I'm just gonna, so this is a lab, so inside a lab we don't have any clues here. Okay, the direct lab. Okay, let's try to build it. It has like 9 options and steps. Okay, build an app that is functionally similar to this example project. Try not to copy. Okay, uh, you should have an h1 element with the text checkout. So here inside the body I'm just gonna open a h1 element. Inside the h1 element, checkout is written. Checkout. You should have two sections element immediately after the h1. Okay, two section element. So I'm just gonna first enter section here, section close. I'm just gonna copy this one again, copy, paste. What? Live stopped here? Let's check. Nope, we are live here. Okay, wait a minute. Yeah, we are live here. Okay, so we are definitely live. So is, wow. Okay, now after we have two section elements, you have an h2 element with text this within the first section element. So inside the first section element I'm just gonna have an h2 element. So I'm just gonna have h2. It's gonna close the h2 element. Inside the h2 element I will have your cart. So your cart element here, you should have an image of the item, of an item in your first section with appropriate alternate text. You can use this image. Okay, first section with appropriate alternate text. Okay, should I add this after your card? Okay, so I'm just gonna have an image imgsrc, copy this, copy, I'm just gonna paste it here, paste. uh, okay, we have an image here. Now after we have done it, uh, it says we should have an appropriate alternate, so I'm just gonna have an alt here, and inside alternate I'm just gonna add a Rubik's cube. Okay, Rubik's cube or Rubik cube, let's search. mm, Rubiks, this is the correct spelling. So I'm just gonna copy this, I'm just gonna okay, I'm just gonna copy and paste here maybe. Okay. Ah, everything is good. You should have an S2 element as a text in the second section. So inside the second section here, I'm just gonna have a S2 element here. I'm just gonna copy here, gonna paste here. So now what we have is you should have an S2 element with the text payment information. So S2 element, uh, and inside element we have payment information. So I'm just gonna copy, just gonna paste. Everything is done. You should have a form element within the second section. So inside the second section I will have a form, so I'm just gonna open a form here, form element. So I'm just gonna do this, I'm just gonna close the form. I have an element, so I should have a form here. You should have an input with an ID name of card name within the form of the label associated with it. So inside the form it says I should have an input field, input, input, and this input field here, inside the input we have an ID, ID equals, and name equals, and both of these will contain card names. So copy, paste, paste. So card name, and a label associated with it. Label. Okay. So label should be above, label, okay. So inside label we should have a card name, card name. So we have a card name here. We can also add the name here maybe, or copy, paste. So we know that, and maybe ID also. I'm just gonna copy, paste here. Now we know that the card name label is associated with this input field, and you should have an input field with blah 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 and same thing. So I'm just gonna copy and paste here. We have a second input field. Now in the second input field it just says replace it with card number here. So I'm just gonna copy, and I'm gonna replace card name with card number, card name with card number, card name with card number. Okay. And also the label name is also card number. Paste. And I'm gonna capitalize this. I'm gonna here I'm gonna capitalize this also. So we have the card number, we have the card name, and we have the input fields. Everything looks correct. Now at least two of the input elements should have required aria required. Just gonna copy. So these two input fields will have this value should be set equals true. Okay. So I'm just gonna copy this. I'm gonna paste it after input, maybe here, and everything looks good. Let's run the test. Okay, all your input fields aren't a type of submit. What? Um, Wait a minute. All your input elements aren't a type of submit should have a label element associated with it. Okay, so we have a label element associated. Okay, card name, and this is card number. So I'm going to associate card number. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to paste it. Okay, now everything should be fine. Okay, I have a label associated with them. At least two of your input elements should have required and have required. Oh, okay, so it is set to true here, so I'm just going to add a required also. Required, and I'm going to what is the input field here? You know, okay, so we have two required also. I'm just going to run the test again. So now only one is not following. All your input elements that aren't a type of submit should have a label. So okay, so label, card name, card name, card name. We have a label here, and we have the name and ID here also. Now card number are required. Everything looks good, bro. What is the problem here? Do I have to add and submit button also? Something is happening here. mm, Studio mode, press chat. Something is happening. My live is actually somehow ending on its own. It is ending on its own, and that is a big problem actually. hmm no problem. Now what I have to do is simply check here what is the. So okay, instructions we have here. I'm just gonna run the test again. I don't know what it says, so I'm just gonna, what is this, preview. We have a label here, card number, input field also card number, true, true, true. I don't know whether what the problem is. What the problem is, I have a form, I have a close, so should I add a submit button here? So input, sorry, button, button type equals submit, button close. is good enough. Let's run the test again. Okay, something is definitely not working here, and this button is also not working. So we have the button. Oh, inside the button I should write submit. Okay, now we have the submit button here. Okay, everything looks good. um, so inside the form we don't have the method here, but it doesn't matter because it is not what we need here. Okay, so let's try to get help, get a hint. Okay, let's try to see this man's code. Okay, let's try this. mm, what is this? Let's go back, cut this, let's get help again, get hint. Should be there. I am doing blah blah blah. Okay, let's this is okay, this is the code here. So here is checkout section. Inside the section, okay, payment form, we have the form here. Form is corrected. Now we have the input id equals to card name, name is equal to this, rd required true, input this, label for card name. So label should be after this. Oh, oh. So inside the label we should use for instead of name here. So for here and for here also. That was the only problem there. Not reset, please just run the test again, and we have built it. So uh, inside the form, when we are adding like our what was that? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, inside the form section, when we are adding input fields, so we should label it with for. So inside the for attribute, sorry, inside the for element, inside the label element, we should use the for attribute, not the name and the id attribute, to associate it with the input field. That is it. Okay. Now we have to review this, and now we should be able to hop onto the css part soon. Let's review this accessibility review, then we should have the quiz. Now accessibility is actually a really complicated question. I think it is really complicated. Let's try to simplify this. So introduction to accessibility, web content accessibility guidelines. The web content accessibility guidelines, WCAG, is a set of rules of guidelines for making web content more accessible for people with disabilities. The four principles of WCAG are POUR, which stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Assertive, assistive technology for accessibility. Screen readers, software program that read content of a computer screen out loud. They are used by people who are blind, visually impaired, to access the web. Large scale or braille keyboards uses by people with visually impairments to access the web. Screen magnifiers software programs that enlarge the content of a computer screen. They are used by people with low vision to access the web. Alternative pointing devices used by people who mobility impairments to access the web. This includes a device such as joysticks, trackballs, and touchpads. Voice recognition used by people with mobility impairment to access the web. It allows users to control the computer with their voice. Accessibility editing tools. Common accessibility tools: Google Lighthouse, Wave, IBM Equal Accessibility Checker, and Axe Dev tools are some of the common accessibility tools to use to audit the accessibility of a website. Accessibility best practices. Proper heading level structures. You should use proper heading levels to create a logical structure for your content. This helps people using assertive technologies understand the content of your website. Accessibility and tables. When using table, you should use th element to define the technologies, understand the structure of the table. With the caption element, you can write the caption or title of a table so users, especially those who use assertive technologies, can quickly understand the table's purpose and content. You should place the caption element immediately after the opening tag of the element table. This way, screen readers and other assertive technologies can provide more context by announcing the caption before reading the content. Okay. Okay. I guess. Hmm. Okay. Let's try another step. Importance for inputs to have an associated label. You should use label element to associate labels with form inputs. This helps people using assertive technologies understand the purpose of input. Importance of good alt text. You should use alt attribute to provide a text alternative for images. This helps the people to use assertive technology understand the content of the image. This is actually really important. And importance of input to have associated labels. You should use label elements to associate labels with form inputs. This helps people using assertive technologies understand the purpose of the input. Okay, now I understand. So label is for the form input, alt is used for image here, captions are used for the tables here. Okay. Importance of good link text. You should use descriptive link text to help users understand the purpose of the link. This helps people using assertive technology understand the purpose of the link. Best practices to make audio and video content accessible. You should use you should provide captions and transcripts for audio and video content to make it accessible with people with hearing impairments. You should also provide audio description for video content to make it accessible to people with visual impairments. Tab index attribute used to make elements focusable and define the relative order in which they should be navigated using the keyboard. It is important to never use the tab index attribute with a value greater than 0. Instead, you should either use a value of 0 or -1. For more information, review the prior lecture video. Okay. Example here, inside a paragraph here, tab index is equal to -1. Sorry, there was an error with your submission. Okay. Used to make elements focusable and define the relative order in which they should navigate the keyboard. Attribute with a value greater than 0. Instead, you should either use a value of 0 or -1. For more information, review prior. Okay. Access key attribute used to define keyboard shortcuts for an element. This can help users with mobility impairments navigate the website more easily. Yeah. That's true. So for example, here button access key here is attribute inside this element, button element. We have the access key attribute set to s. Now we can the uh, if the mouse is not working here, we can use the s key, alt plus s key, to save the document or save the something if you want to save. Similarly, c for cancel, and here h for the link here. So if you want to go to this link, so we should just press alt plus h. Now VAI ARIA roles and attributes. VAI ARIA stands for Web Accessibility Initiative Accessible Rich Internet Application. It is a set of attributes that can be added to HTML elements to improve accessibility. It provides additional information to assertive technologies about the purpose of the structure and the content. ARIA roles is a set of predefined roles that can be added to HTML and will define their purpose. This helps the people using assertive technologies to understand the content of website. For example, role equals tab, role equals menu, role equals alert. Okay, okay. So they are just predefined HTML elements for their purpose. So this will just, we can just add this to um, those elements we don't have we don't know what are these, like if a div is a menu, you can add the role to menu, so that the people with accessibility issues can understand easily that this div is actually going to be used as a menu. There are 6 main categories of ARIA roles. Document structure roles. These roles define the overall structure of a web page. With these roles, assertive technologies can understand the relationship between different sections and help user navigate the content. Widget roles. These roles define the purpose and functionality of interactive elements like scroll bars. Landmark roles. These roles classify the label and the primary section of the web page. Screen readers use them to provide the convenient navigation to important section of a page. Live region roles. These roles define element with content and will change dynamically. This way, screen readers and other assertive technologies can announce the change to users with visible disabilities. Window roles. These roles define sub-windows like pop-up, modal dialogues. These roles include alert dialogues and dialogue. Abstract roles. These roles are help organize the document. They are only meant to be used initially by the browser, not by the developer. So you should know that they exist, but you shouldn't use them on your website or web application. Okay, I guess. Now, what we have is ARIA label and ARIA labeled by. Okay. These attributes are used to give an element programmatic or accessible name, which we use to people assertive technologies such as screen readers. Okay, often used by visual labels and images symbol under ARIA label. So allows you to define the other name directly. Allows you to I don't know why my mind is just rejecting to actually understand all these sentences. I don't know why. Let's try and see what it does by this example code. Button here, ARIA label is equal to search. So this I class pass for search button. Okay. So this here is actually a button. Input type text, ARIA labeled by search button. Button type. Okay. Uh, okay, which helps the people understand. Okay, they are more often used as a visual label for element is in an image or a symbol rather than text. So they are often used when a visual label for an element is an image. Okay, okay, or a symbol. Okay, now understand. So if the element is not a element is the same element is not a button here, maybe this, if it is a button but it is not a HTML button, it is actually, the button is actually a, let's say, image. If you click on that image, that should act as a button. So if that's the case here, we should use aria label here. So the aria label here is actually gonna tell us that what is this button for. So this image, when we click on this, it will act as a search button. Now allows you to define the name directly in the attribute, while this allows you to reference existing text on the page. Reference existing text on the page. So maybe this is the text here. So in maybe uh, let's say that this text is used as a search button, and this text is actually on the page. So now if we use this aria labeled by here, like this here, it will tell us that this text is actually used as a button, search button. So here input type is text, search button, and button type is button, search button, search. Okay, now we have an input field and we have an input button, and this input field is associated with this button. So if we input text here and search, click on this button here, this button will be act as a search button. So if we have to associate something with something, like if we want to link this input field with this button, we will use the aria labeled by in the input section here, and not the aria label. Aria labeled by will be used. Now if you talk about the aria hidden attribute used to hide an element, assertive technology such as screen readers, for example, this can be used to hide decorative images that do not provide any meaningful content. For example, here there is a button, inside the button there is a class here, and aria hidden is true, so this means that this button will be hidden. Aria expanded attribute to convey the state of the toggle or disclosure feature. So if it is true, then it is actually expanded, and if it is false, then it is not expanded. Aria live used to indicate that the element's content is important enough to require that any changes to the content should be announced immediately to the screen reader user. This can include status messages like updating the number of results returned from a search, or an image message displayed after an unsuccessful submission. For example, here there is a div and we added aria live assertive here. Your session will expire in 30 seconds. Okay, so this is assertive because every second it will just remind the user that you have this much second left. So this is assertive, this will update continuously. Now this is polite. Polite means if it is uploaded, then it will say that the file is successfully uploaded, else it will say it is not. Common aria states: aria hash pop up, aria checked, aria disabled, aria selected. These attributes can be used to indicate the state of the element and help people using assertive technologies understand the content of the website. Okay, aria hash pop attribute here. So these attributes are used to indicate the state of the element. Okay, help the people using assertive technology understand the content of the web page. Aria hash pop up attribute. This state is used to indicate that that an interactive element will be triggered, a pop-up element when activated. Okay, For you can use only the ARIA has pop attribute when the pop-up has one of the following menus: list box, three grids, tree grids, or dialog box. Dialog. The value of ARIA has must either be true or false. Must be either one of these or true, which is the same as menu. For example, here there is a button with ID this, and ARIA has pop-up menu here, and ARIA controls file menu, and ARIA expanded false file button. So this is just saying that this button is expandable and it is not expanded yet. So if you click on this button, it will expand, and when the expansion happens, we will and we'll see a unordered list on the web page, and inside the unordered list here we have the role, we have the ARIA label by menu button, and we have the list li role, which it means the menu item, tab index -1 -1 -1. I don't know what that means. Open new save delete. Okay, ARIA checked. This attribute is used to indicate whether the element is the checked state. It is important, most commonly used when the creating custom checkboxes, radio buttons, switches. I am done with this. This is terrible. Okay. Div role checkbox ARIA checked true, tab index 0 checkbox. Though this is basically a div which is acting as a checkbox here, so that's why it is the role is checkbox. So okay, and it is also checked, so it is true. It is already checked. ARIA disabled attribute is a state used to indicate that the element is disabled, and only people using assistive technologies such as diff roles buttons x tab index -1 ARIA disabled true edit. Okay, ARIA selected attribute state used to indicate that an element is selected. You can use this state or custom controls like tab interface or list or a grid. Div roles tab list, button roles tab ARIA selected true, and ARIA selected false false. There are three tabs here. ARIA controls attributes used to associate an element with another element that is controls. This helps people using assistive technologies under the relationship between the element. Div role tab list. So this is a tab list here. This is a div actually, and this is actually the role is tab list. So this is a list of tabs here. So first button, the role is tab. Okay, this is a tab here. Okay, section 1, tab 1, tab 2, tab 3. Okay, div close. Now the last thing is ARIA described by attribute used to provide additional information about an element by associating it with another element that contains the information. Okay, this gives people using screen readers immediate access to the additional information when they navigate to the element. Common uses of the text input error and associating formatting instruction to text input or an error message input. Okay, submission. For example, there is a form here. Inside the form, the label is password, and password for password input type is password. So this label is associated with this input field. Inside this input field, we have the ID which associates the label with the input. Both for and ID is used here. ARIA described as password help here. Okay, there is a paragraph here, ID password help, and ARIA described by here will actually tells the user with accessibility issues, if they are blind, like for example, it will tell that your password must be at least 8 character long, and this information is actually given to a normal user when he does not actually enters a password that is 8 character long. Now if you are a disabled user, you will get this information in prior, or you will get this information before. So now we have actually submitted. Now let's take the test, and if we are good, then we should be able to. And lastly, we have the HTML review. Now what should I do here is I will take accessibility tests. So at least 18 out of 10 should be. What is accessibility? Okay, accessibility is a set of standardized practices to ensure the web application can be used by the. Okay, accessibility set of understand no. um, First one is true. Which of the following is a good example of proper heading level structure? So let me see. This is proper. Okay. What are the 6 main categories of ARIA rules? This is the correct answer. 6 main categories, na? Landmark, house, no. Document structure, landmark, window, abstract, widget, and live reason are the 6 main. What is the correct way to add alt attribute? Correct way? Image, this is wrong, this is wrong, this of course this is right. What does YARIA stands for? It stands for this. What is the role of ARIA hidden? This attribute is used to hide elements only from user impairments. Yep, that's the correct answer. Which attribute makes element focusable and defines the relative order in which they are navigated using the keyboard? Wait a minute. Which attribute makes the element focusable? Tab index, keyboard index, index tab, tabbing index, tab index. I don't know the answer. Maybe this one is the answer. It says this attribute makes the element focusable and defines the relative order in which they are navigated using the keyboard. Relative order. Why it is a good practice to include the caption element inside the HTML table? It is a good practice to include caption element inside. It helps to improve. It helps the second one is the correct answer. What is the difference between the ARIA label and labeled by? The ARIA label attribute allows you the given element access to a name referencing the existing name, and label attribute allows you to define the name attribute itself. True answer. No. Which of the following ARIA states is used to indicate that the element is selected? ARIA selected. Which of the following is not an ARIA state? Disabled, hidden, checked columns. Which of the following example is the correct way to associate label with the input element? Label with the input element. Wait a minute. For here, type and ID. This is wrong. So this is also wrong. Form here, label for here, name is here, and ID and name are same. Type is text. This is the correct answer. How does the screen magnifier visually impaired user navigate the web pages? The screen magnifier converts the braille and the screen magnifier automatically adjusts the screen magnifier will enlarge only images with to twice their size. Better visually impaired users. The screen magnifier will navigate allowing zoom in and out. This is the correct answer maybe. What is the role of ARIA hash pop-up attribute? It specifies the language of the element content. मम्मी पाइन दे ना कनी. Hmm. We are good to go, I guess. What is the role of ARIA hash pop-up attribute? To indicate that the element can trigger a pop-up, like, yeah, that's true. Which of the following is not a commonly used ARIA role? Menu access tab alert. Menu is a role. Maybe this one. Which of the following attribute is used to create a live reason on your page, which can be used to notify the screen reader if the dynamic content changes? Live. No, reason. What is the purpose of role attribute? Role attribute. Mm, why it is important to use descriptive link? Yeah. Which of the following is the best practice for making audio video accessible? Which of the following attributes is used to indicate that the elements in the checked state? ARIA is checked or checked? Checked, maybe. Finish. I'm gonna fail this one, I guess. 17 out of. Are you kidding me? Okay, let's test. This is incorrect. Which of the following attribute is used to create a live reason? This is not the answer. So live was the answer. Okay. Now one of these are also correct. Incorrect. Yeah. Attribute to make the element focusable and to relative order which they are navigated. Okay. Keyboard index. And what is the role of ARIA hidden attribute? What? How did I get this wrong? Yeah, this is the correct answer. Third one. Okay. Let's take the text again. We are not gonna stop until we get it. So exit the, let's quit the test. Let's take it, uh, where is it? Yeah, I'm gonna take the quiz here again. Let's try this once again, and if we don't get it, then it's our fault. Okay, which of the following is not the main ARIA rules? Hmm. Hidden is not ARIA rule. Which of the following is not a commonly used alternative point? Scanners, of course. Which of the uh, tab index attribute? Tab index. Mhm. It is used to make element focusable and define the relative order in which they should be navigated using the keyboard. It is used to indicate that the interactive element will trigger a pop-up element when activated. I don't know, bro. I don't know the answer. Tab index. What is the role of tab index? It is used to make elements focusable and define the relative order in which they should be navigated. I guess this is the correct answer. Common accessibility tool. AWS validator, wave. Wave is one, I guess. This is the AWS does not have an accessibility checker, I guess. IBM equal accessibility wave maybe. I don't know. Which of the following rules is used to define the purpose of the functionality of the interactive element in like scroll bar? Interactive element. So widget. No, 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 no. Live region because it's interactive. Okay. Why? What is the function of live region roles? These roles are dynamically label. Uh, Cucchiairovani picciarorati giovani चक्कर वरंडा वारे टैग दी so तनु सोरी ये नहीं फैशन की हुन तेरे यार दत्ता वक्कर सवाग तब जामा साडू तेनु सोहे मसिर तोरी वालो तेरा लगने so तनु सोरी ये नहीं फैशन की हुन तेरे यार दत्ता वक्कर सवागनी. Correct way to add a label. Okay, so we are just adding label. Label. La, 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 la. Let's take a cancer. What is the purpose of if this is gonna be a wrong one? So I'm just gonna leave it now here. I'm totally dead today. What are the following correct way to indicate that the tab is selected? Selected. Hmm. Mm, 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 Arya expanded. Yeah. Common Arya rule. Mm, perceivable, operable. Yeah. Disabled, not disable. Which of the following attribute is used to define the keyboard shortcut of an element? Keyboard shortcut. The swag window. Kurta pajama to me. The following attribute is used to define a keyboard shortcut for an element. Provide access key. Fuck this game. Accessing key. Define a keyboard shortcut for an element. Keyboard shortcut for an element. The character the swag below. Kurta pajama to a black below. Sakadani tera kuchiya bag below. Keyboard shortcut for an element. I don't know. Who cares? This is this is the correct answer. What is the landmark role used for? They are used to add labels to the table and forms only. Kurta swag below, the pajama to a black below. Terana sam sakdani tera guchiara bag below. Sano load nikane di kumidani hatta. What are the landmarks rule used for? They are used to classify the label and primary section of the page. My brain is totally dead now. Which of the following is the correct way to indicate whether the element is checked in state? Hmm. Checked होगा कहीं पे Arya's checked, yeah, this is the correct answer. Which of the following example window role, which of the following is an example of a window role? Window. Hidden maybe? What is voice recognition software used for? Um, Voice recognition software. Tools let people with disability use their voice to add tabs and I think the first one is correct. Hide an icon from assertive technology. Hide an icon. Hidden is the correct answer. Which of the following attribute is used to create programmatic relationship between elements and control persistence of another element on the web page? The following attribute is used to create a programmatic relationship between elements that controls another element. So controls maybe. Finish. I stand sure. Yep, 13 out of 20. Poor performance. Okay, I'm just gonna end the live right now, but we're gonna definitely hop onto the CSS stream tomorrow. And for today, it's already like